Welcome to When Winter Visits the Sunshine State. I am Lily Browning. I am the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program Coordinator at Hernando County Utilities. And for this very short program, we're going to discuss 10 tips for dealing with old man winter in Central Florida. We have a cold front coming up right around Christmas, so I know some of you would like some, information of how to deal with that. So tip number one, don't panic. Our cold snaps never last very long. We have what I call 3-day winters. We have a series of 3-day winters through the winter season. So it never lasts very long. We have 3 days of a cold snap and then everything warms up again. And then we're going to repeat the cycle, possibly through the beginning of April. So we do need to be aware here in Central Florida, that it can get cold. It can dip down into the teens. The cold front that we're expecting is going to be in the high 20s. And, that shouldn't be much of a problem because it's not going to stay that cold for that long. But tip number two is the number one principle of Florida Friendly Landscaping, which is the right plant in the right place. The right plant in the right place is means also the right zone. So if we have tropical plants that are meant to grow in the Keys or Miami, yeah, they're going to have some problems through our very cold winters. And we'll talk about what to do about those. But in general, if they are meant for Central Florida or whatever region you're in, they're going to withstand the cold. Will they get, frozen and bitten on their foliage? Sure. Will they look ugly for a while? Sure. Are they going to die from the roots? Most likely not. Tip number three, a good thing to do to prepare the plants for a cold front that's coming is to water the soil prior to the freeze. The good news about that is nature usually does that for us. I have not been through very many cold snaps here in Florida where the rain has not brought the cold snap in and also then taken that cold snap out. So it's great that the rain comes, gets that soil nice and moist, so it's going to retain a little bit more heat. The cold snap comes and then it rains again. Just kind of help the plants a little bit recover before it goes on its way. It can happen that we get these cold snaps without a rain, in which case a few days ahead of time, not the plant, and do not do it the night of, the time that it's going to get cold, because you will cause more damage that way. It needs to be a few days before and water the soil, not the plant. Tip number four, the science behind covering your cold sensitive plants. We see a lot of people going out there and wrapping up plants. And I tell everyone a plant is not a mammal. You and I, how are we going to get warm? We're going to be inside covered up with maybe a blanket around us, because we as mammals can generate our own heat. Plants do not do that. So wrapping them in this lollipop style really does not accomplish anything except keeping you busy while you're getting ready for the cold front. The science behind covering a cold sensitive plant is what we're after is that ground heat. We don't have permafrost. It's not going to get really cold in our soil. Maybe the top few inches, maybe in the 40s, which is certainly above freezing. Very much further below than that, you're going to have possibly even 70s. So what we want to do is capture that ground heat and hold it in around the plant. That is the idea of covering your plants when we have a cold front. So you're trying to capture the radiant heat from the ground. So you want to use a tent, a covering that is cloth. You can get frost cloth from nurseries. You can layer them up if it's going to get extra cold. Those work really, really well. or you can use a blanket. What you do not want to use is a plastic. Plastic is, could actually transfer the cold to your plant. So you want to use cloth. You want to drape it so that it is on the ground. Nothing is hanging up. You want to completely encapsulate that plant. The ideal situation is if you create some kind of tent situation that is not touching the plant at all. That's not always practical. So just be sure that it is covering. Usually a tree like this, you're not going to really cover, but a smaller plant, make sure the cover reaches all the way to the ground, and even put some weights on it so it doesn't blow away. That is what we're doing, capturing this radiant heat from the ground. It doesn't have to be 75 degrees in there. It has to be 33 degrees in there. Unless you have a real tropical that is sensitive to, in the 40s. Tip number 5, this is not for us. Do not cover your plants in a sheet of ice. First of all, you're going to violate watering restrictions. Second of all, the farmers do this, and it's a very scientific method, and it involves continual applying the water on there, because what is happening is in that moment of freezing, there is energy expended that actually produces a little bit of heat. So on your irrigation system in your yard, it's going to turn off and on and off and on. That's why the farmers are up all night long watching this, because if it turns off, then there's disaster. So this is not for homeowners. So that is not what we can do. Again, as we mentioned, I just talked about creating these lollipops. Here we go, tip number 6. Lollipops are for suckers, especially in a pot. That is not going to accomplish anything. Here, this is completely around to the ground with bricks holding it down. As I mentioned, the ideal situation, which if it's a very small plant, a box, could accomplish the same thing. Just cover it up and put some weights on top of it. And there you go. You are capturing that radiant heat. Make sure that the cloth covering touches the ground. We don't want to try to do lollipops. And again, tip number 7, once we have covered these plants, we don't want to leave them covered for days on end. It's going to get, yes, we're going to get in the 20s, but it's not going to be in the 20s very long. By the time you get up, certainly by 10 o'clock in the morning, it's going to be at least be in the 40s. So go out there and release those plants so that they are not trapped and can photosynthesize and, do everything that they need to do. Tip number 8, we live in Central Florida. We have winter, even though I said we have 3 days, 3-day cold snaps, 3-day winters. We do have winter. So it's okay if your yard looks like it's winter. Some plants will die back to the ground. I personally have not seen root killing freezes in over a dozen years here in Florida. Pruning encourages new growth, which is more sensitive to upcoming freezes. So you don't want to prune anything. If you were up north, you wouldn't be paying much attention to your yard right now at all, because you would expect it to look like winter. Same thing here. It's okay if you have some dead looking plants. Probably your roots will not die, but if you prune it back and it starts that tender new growth, you could fatally damage the plant. So don't prune at least until mid-March. But as I mentioned, we've had some cold snaps on April 3rd before, generally not after. Now here's the big thing. Tip number 9. As I said, it's okay for your yard to look like it's winter. So learn to love your golden lawn. We have warm season grasses here in Florida. That is why your grass up north was green under the snow, because it was a cool season grass. We have warm season grasses that will turn golden, not brown, not dead, not straw, golden in the winter, and that's okay. Your lawn is in a semi-dormancy state. It has sloughed off a good amount of its roots. Let it sleep. Let it take its winter nap. You want to mow less often and mow very, very high, 4 inches at least. You can skip a week of irrigation or not irrigate at all. No amount of irrigation, no amount of fertilizer is going to bring that lawn suddenly green and back. It's responding to not only the cold, but also to the shorter daylight hours. It's doing what the plant, has within its DNA to do. Don't worry, as soon as the spring rains come back, it will spring back. I have not seen a lawn killed by any of our cold snaps again in 12 or 15 years. So keep it safe and let it rest, let it look like winter. Potted plants are another issue that you may have to think about in this cold weather. Those roots are not protected by the ground temperature. So if you don't have a place that you can bring them into, such as your garage, or if they're too big or there's too many, group them together. And here's a interesting way that somebody I know went to protect her potted plants. She brought them near the house where it'd be a little warmer, and she used this ladder so that she could put covers over her potted plants. As long as that's reaching the ground and you're keeping some of that heat in, probably do a pretty good job at protecting those potted plants. And the last tip is that you can learn more at some of my Hernando County government YouTube videos. Go to Hernando County government YouTube, look for the Hernando County Florida Friendly Landscaping playlist, and look for these programs: After the Freeze, Protecting Pollinators from the Cold, Winter is Coming, and that one is pinned at the top of my Facebook page right now, as well as Your Florida Friendly Winter Landscape. Thank you for listening to these fast tips today, and everyone have happy holidays and stay nice and warm. And thank you, and have a wonderful Florida friendly holiday.